louder than words. Or as my mother would put it, talk is cheap. It takes money to buy whiskey. In other words, we can say whatever we want to, but if we don't follow those words with actions, well, we're hypocrites. We're all talk and no action. And when all we do is talk what we will do, about what we're going to do without ever doing anything, we lose credibility with ourselves and with others. Now, Jesus talked a lot. In fact, wherever he went, he talked. He talked about the kingdom of God. He talked about God's love. He talked about serving God by serving God's people. He talked about loving his enemies. And he said we don't have to worry because God will take care of us. Wherever he went, Jesus talked. But he did more than just talk. Jesus also took action. In fact, his entire ministry was built around meeting the needs of those he encountered. The story of the feeding of the 5,000, actually it's 20,000 because some of us do count women and children. That story in the Gospel of Matthew was used to illustrate Jesus and God's commitments to meeting our needs. Now, in the verses just before this story, Jesus had learned about the gruesome death of his cousin, John the Baptist. Now, John's death was probably one of those times, probably the first time, when our very human Jesus thought about his own ministry. His ministry that could lead to his own gruesome death. Jesus needed time to grieve John's death, and he needed time to think about the trajectory his ministry was taking. So Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee to find a place where he could be alone and spend some time thinking and in prayer. Well, the crowd saw Jesus get into a boat, and they decided to set course for the other side of this inland sea. The crowd just wasn't ready to let Jesus go. They had friends, they had loved ones who needed Jesus' touch and his healing. So the crowd followed Jesus' progress on water with their own progress on land. The Sea of Galilee is 13 miles long and about 8 miles wide. And for the people in the first century, 8 miles, well, that was less than half a day's walk. So they watched his progress as he sailed across the lake, and when he got out of the boat, the crowd, which by now was about 20,000 people, was already there waiting for him. In that moment, Jesus had a choice to make. He could ignore the people that had followed him. He could turn away the crowd and insist that he needed a little bit of alone time, because let's face it, he was sad, he was tired, and probably more than a little frightened about his own future. So I have no doubt that Jesus took a few minutes to just think about what he was going to do next. Jesus knew his choice was important. He could put his words into action, or he could turn away those who desperately needed what Jesus had to offer. He could stay and meet the needs of the crowd, or he could order his closest followers to tell everybody to turn around and go home, come another day. He could put his words into action, or he could just be all talk with no action. Talk was cheap, and Jesus realized it took time, energy, and devotion to meet the needs of the crowd. So Jesus spent the day healing and talking with the people in the crowd. Now, by the end of the day, everybody was hungry, and the villages where people could buy something to eat were a few miles away. So Jesus' followers came to him to remind him it was time to close up shop and send everybody away where they could buy some supper. Jesus responded by saying no one had to leave. The disciples could share their food. Now, this was a group of people who truly lived on the kindness of strangers. And some days the kindness was a great banquet put up forward by a Pharisee, and other times it was what they had with them that day, 5 small loaves and 2 fish. I don't know about you, but as one of Jesus' followers, I might have been reluctant to give up the little scrap of food I was going to have. But Jesus took that meager meal and he blessed it, and he told his followers to pass that bread and that fish around to everyone. We don't know how the miracle transpired. I suspect we all have our own ideas about what actually took place. But somehow, everyone was fed. And there were enough leftovers that Jesus and his followers could have a bit of breakfast the next day. Jesus saw that the needs of the crowd were met. He took action and he met them. And God's love became real for the crowd every time Jesus met their needs. Now, there's a concept in the Christian church that's been around for about 10 years. In fact, there's a book on this title. The concept is called needs-based evangelism. And needs-based evangelism starts with the premise that actions speak louder than words. That congregations will gain members by being good Samaritans to their communities, by meeting the needs. So the idea is when a church sees a need in our community, our job is to meet that need. And the belief is that as we meet the needs of our recipients, they will be drawn to the love of God they experience through the congregation. And as we meet the needs, others who are watching in the community, and they do watch, will see that we have a church that's not just filled with self-centered hypocrites, but rather people who put their actions where their mouths are, and they will come flocking to that church. Meeting needs is what Jesus did, it's what our missionaries do, and the belief is needs-based evangelism will meet the needs of the community and thereby gain members. That's what Jesus did. When we think about our mission, our congregation's mission is to expand our ministry to Manitowoc County and beyond, making new disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And one way we do that is through personal invitation. But another way we can do that is to ask people or to meet the needs of the people that we see. Now, I admit that needs-based evangelism, it's a good idea, but it sounds really scary and daunting to me. Maybe I'm the only one. No. Because if we look around, the needs in our community are many. If we look around, there are needs in people's lives that we meet every day that we just can't meet because there are so many and we are so few. There are so many and our own time and our own energy is limited. I have great respect for Jesus and his ability to meet everyone's needs, to have the energy, to have the time, to have the compassion. But I suspect we all have our own personal limits, and as a congregation we have our limits as well. So the question becomes for us, not how do we meet all the needs, but instead, what strengths, abilities, and gifts has God given us as individuals and as a congregation that we can use to meet the needs of our communities? What strengths do we possess? Bless you. What gifts do we possess? What abilities do we have that are easy for us to do, that we can easily use, that we are willing to use to meet the needs of the community around us? Well, as we approach our fall program year, as eventually the weather will start to get colder and the leaves will start to fall, as we wind down summer activities, I invite us all to be looking around at the needs in our communities. What do we see in our communities? What do we see on the Lakeshore that will help people's lives? What do we see going on in people's lives that we can do something about? I invite us to look for hungry people, lonely people, people who feel like they don't belong. I invite us to look for ways that we can expand our ministry in our communities by caring for people's bodies and souls, to look for ways we can care for creation while inviting others to join us. Everybody understand the assignment? Mm-hmm. And those who are worshiping with us online, we invite you to look around in your community. What's going on in your community that we can help to provide? Are you in a place where your school system needs help? Are you in your own life in a place where you are needing help? Just let us know. Together, we will see if we can meet that need. And when you identify a need, when you see something that you say, you know, our congregation can probably do that. First, you think about the strengths of our congregation. What do we do well? What is something that we working together can do and do well? And when you see a need that we can meet, please come talk to me or to a member of our leadership board. Who's on the leadership board who's here today? Why don't you stand up so people can identify you? Because I got to tell you, some people would rather come talk to you because they know if they come talk to me, I'm going to say, great, how can we help you do that? I mean, you're on to me. You know that's going to happen. So go talk to a member of the leadership board, or please come talk to me. I'll promise I'll try not to make that my automatic response. Because, friends, there are needs in our communities. There's a need on this lakefront. And we have a congregation, we have individuals who are filled with strengths, who have gifts, who have abilities. And if we marshal together to meet those needs, we'll be making an impact on our community, on people's lives, and eventually in our world. And I've got to tell you, people beyond our walls are watching. They're watching. There are a lot of people in these communities who don't go to church, and they're watching to see what churches do. And they're watching to see if we are all talk, or do we actually put our words into action. People are watching because they know talk is cheap. Amen.
Amen.